Good morning. Oh, that was quite loud. Good morning. Thank you, Sarah. So this morning we're going to be looking at the second of our I Am series from John's Gospels. And last week we heard from Russell, who was speaking on John 6, verse 35, when Jesus said, "I am the bread of life." Now, in this morning's passage from John's Gospel, as you have already gathered from what Sarah has already covered, Jesus says, "I am the gate," which we are going to come to. And actually, before I say that, I'd just like to say that quite a bit of what I'm going to say has already come up one way or another. And when God does things more than once, we're meant to take notice, aren't we? So I am totally trusting that we need to hear this. And you know how things soak in layers, and you get it goes in like to one depth, and then it's like the Lord speaks again and he stirs us up a bit, and then it like drops down to another level of understanding, and then maybe another level. So if you feel like you're already kind of soaked in some of this, I'm just going to trust that God's going to speak to us, and it's going to drop into like another level of like resonance in your being. So I will not apologise if there's some repetition, even of pictures. Sarah and I were obviously looking at the same resources. Oh, yes. Sorry, is it me bumping? Okay, how's that? Better? Okay, good. Thank you. So, yes, back to this morning's passage. So, I am the gate, which we're going to be talking about. We're going to come back to the sort of front end of the passage in a little bit, but we're just going to go to verse 10, actually, of the passage. So this is John chapter 10. And Jesus says, "I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." So, my question for you is this. How would you know if you had life to the full? What would define it? What qualities would it have? So, have a think, and then I'd like to turn to the people sitting around you and have a bit of a chat about that. Now, if that's not for you and you're horrified at the prospect of that, then just fold your arms and nobody will talk to you. But if you just would, turn to the people around you and just have a think. How would you know if you had life to the full, and what would it look like? Off you go.
How would you know? I think it might look like no pain, no suffering, none of the negative things. Does that make sense? So like anger and frustration and those things. Does that make sense? Yeah? What do you think? Life to the full. What would life to the full look like for you? What would you like to do that you can't? So I guess that's no more pain, but in a different
Okay, so maybe just bringing your thoughts together, and feel free to continue these conversations at coffee or tea after the service. So we're going to circle back to this question. So yeah, hold those thoughts. So we're looking at this passage from chapter 10 of John's Gospel. Now, the Gospel means good news. It's the story of Jesus' life written by John, or from John's account. And he was a disciple of Jesus who witnessed Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. And this story comes about halfway through his account. And it's after the story of the Samaritan woman at the well, We've had the healing of the man who couldn't walk for 38 years by the pool of Bethesda. We've had the feeding of the 5,000, and the woman who was caught in adultery has been brought to him. So it comes after those stories. So as we turn to our passage today, to understand the context of this, we need to look back at what has happened in the previous chapter, which is the account of the man who was blind from birth. So Jesus and his disciples are walking along, and they come across a man who's been born blind. And it prompts a discussion between them. So Jesus' disciples ask him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" So the clear implication is that someone's done something wrong here that had made him like this. And that disability is the punishment for wrongdoing. So this comes from Leviticus, or part of the tradition, but it was forbidden in the law in Leviticus 21 for any man blind or lame, disfigured or disabled to come near the altar in the temple. So it was a really understood stigma. And Jesus says, neither. This happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. So Jesus heals the man of his blindness, and the Pharisees get to hear about it, and they bring the man in for questioning. So the Pharisees were a prominent religious group who had great influence with the masses, and they believed in the law of Moses and the oral tradition of interpretation of the law. And they are outraged that this has been done on a Sabbath, when no work should be done. So they interrogate the healed man, and they declare that Jesus must be a sinner. And they ask the man about that, and he says he doesn't know about that, but one thing he does know is, I was blind, but now I see. And then he goes on to say, nobody, the blind man who's now seeing, nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. So the Pharisees are outraged, and they throw him out of the synagogue. And then a little later in the chapter, we hear that the blind man, or the seeing man, is now worshipping Jesus, and he's recognizing that he is the Son of Man. He is the Messiah. And right at the end of the chapter, Jesus says to the Pharisees, in a reversal of all their expectations and their understandings, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains. So he's referring to their lack of willingness to understand that they are the guilty ones, in contrast with their view that the blind man or his parents are sinners, for their refusal to see what's right in front of them, for their hard hearts, and the hypocrisy that the ones who are meant to be leading the people to God are so caught up in the law, they can't see and refuse to see what's right in front of them. And worse still, they want to use this healing and the healing of the man by the pool and the woman caught in adultery, those stories, they want to use all these ways as a way to trap Jesus. So this sets the scene for our passage, which kicks off with Jesus talking to the Pharisees. So last week, I am the bread of life statement. That was to the crowd who'd followed Jesus across the lake. But this time, it's directed at the Pharisees. And we're going to start by looking at the first chunk. So very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way, is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice. So Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. So, maybe I don't want to be on that one. Let's stay there. So I know a bit about sheep, or at least how we manage sheep in this country. So I'm going to tell you about my sheepy credentials. So I was lambing. I went lambing for 10 years, right through my teens and my student years. It was a good source of income. And it was my yearly dose of sheep that reminded me why I didn't want to work with them for the rest of the year. They get themselves into all sorts of bother. They get stuck on their backs. They get stuck in fences. They escape. And they die at the drop of a hat. 1 minute it's standing there fine, the next minute it's just standing, not chewing, not doing anything, and the next minute it's dead. And in this country, we use sheepdogs to chase them for where we want them to go, don't we? Or we run around after them, more tiring, far more fun, on a quad bike, and we round them up that way. And we have rich grasslands for them to graze in fields, so we put them in fields. So it was very different, or is very different in the Middle East, and even more different 2,000 years ago. Sheep were not chased around by dogs nipping at their heels. Instead, they would know their shepherd and follow him, trusting him, the one to follow who would take them to good pastures and drinking water and defend them against attackers. And if they were out in distant pastures, so Sarah's mentioned this already. I have a different picture for this one. If they were out in distant pastures, a long way from home, the sheep would be gathered up at night in a pen made of maybe boulders and thorny thicket, like in Sarah's picture earlier, or a cave, and the shepherd would sleep in the doorway to guard the sheep, looking out for wild animals like wolves or protecting them from thieves. But if they were near a town or a village, there would be a sheepfold that other shepherds would use as well, and the sheep would all be put together, and a hired hand would guard them for the night, and then the shepherd could go home for the night. The way in was through the gate. We've had this one, haven't we? The way in was through the gate. Anyone not using the gate had no business to be there. That means they were up to no good, like sheep rustlers looking to steal, or wild animals trying to climb over the top to grab one to eat. But in this passage, we're hearing about a public type of sheep pen that might be near a town with several different flocks of sheep in it. So anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way is a robber. The gatekeeper, so that was usually a hired hand, opens the gate for him, the shepherd, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own sheep, he goes ahead of them. And his sheep follow him because they know his voice. So he can't be taking out other people's sheep with him. They hear his voice and they know him. And sheep really do get to know and trust the shepherd's voice, as you're going to see in this clip. So we're just going to go up to 24 seconds, I'm hoping. John, am I hitting the button or are you? I'm hitting the button. Here we go.
Sheep, come on, sheep. Come on, sheep.
Here they come. Thanks, John. You could pause it. Could you go on to where it's 1 minute? I'm being very precise here. 1 minute and 2 seconds, please, John, on that same clip. Just because I liked this bit, I thought you might enjoy it. So 1 minute and 2.
Sheep, come on, sheep.
Here we go.
Come on. Come on, sheep. Good girls. Come on.
Sort of sheepy athletics required for this, isn't there? You know, they're not too sure. That's great, thanks, John. So if we go back to the passage. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they don't recognize a stranger's voice. So in this next clip, you're going to see that the sheep are contentedly following along behind the shepherd, and it's not as though there isn't grass there, because you might think, well, if it's all bare and barren, they're going to follow along, but you're going to see full of grass, but they know his voice. Now, I can say the sheep that I worked with, because we used sheepdogs and rounded them up and chased them, this would not have happened. This is because they knew his voice. And as he says, if they're not his sheep, they're not going to follow. So if we could have the next clip, John. And we're going from 20 seconds on this one, please.
This is Ray over here at Namrack Farms. It's a beautiful thing just to...
Oh.
Hey, good morning. This is Ray over here.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, good morning. This is Ray over here at Namrack Farms. It's a beautiful thing just to be out with your sheep, hanging out with them. Lately, I've been reading a lot about sheep that hear the voice of the shepherd. It's been made me think a little bit. No matter how hard I try, if a sheep is not a member of the flock here on the Namrack farm, if I walk up to some other place where sheep are at and I start to call out, they don't know my voice. They're not coming. In fact, they'll never know my voice unless they end up at my farm and they intermingle with my sheep.
Okay. So you saw them all just pootling along very contentedly behind him, weren't they? Oh, that lovely grass. As I said, in this country, the sheep be off. They'd be like gone into that grass. But they're just like pootling along behind him because they know him. So Jesus continued. Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. So he continues. Therefore Jesus said again, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pastures. The thief comes only to steal and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. So he's really spelling it out for the Pharisees and for us today. I am the gate for the sheep. There's only one way into the sheepfold, and it's through the gate. It's through Jesus. We hear it twice in 3 verses. We're meant to take notice. A shepherd would lay across the entrance to keep the flock safe, as Sarah was saying, a sort of go-between between the world and the safety of the sheepfold. Inside, safe. Outside, threat. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers. He's probably referring here to false prophets, of which historical accounts from the time tell us there were several in the decades before Jesus and, of course, afterwards. Jews who claimed that they were the Messiah, and they tried to rally support in the form of a military campaign against the Romans, the occupying force. And these had ended in suppression by the regime and death. But it shaped the thinking for the Pharisees and the people about what they thought the Messiah was going to look like, what they were anticipating. And verse 9, whoever enters through me will be saved. It's through Jesus that we are saved. He is the Saviour. He is the Messiah. That's it. No exams, no Herculean tasks, no striving, no assessment of suitability, no forms to fill in, no waiting for a decision from the powers that be, no interview with God, just entering through Jesus, trusting Jesus. Like, how unconditional is that? They will come in and go out and find pasture. It's not like a trap or a place to get stuck. They can come and go, and there's freedom. But within the sheepfold, it's a place of safety. It's like a harbour, a refuge, a place to be surrounded and encircled by God's love. There is no other way into the sheepfold. Any other possibility is over the top of the walls or through the thorns, the way of the wolves or the thieves and the robbers who come only to steal and kill and destroy. So the Pharisees are calling Jesus a sinner. Remember the last chapter with the healing of the blind man. They are choosing to not come through the gate. There is no middle ground. They're not following him. They're putting themselves on the outside of the pen and keeping themselves there. There are two possibilities here. You're either in the pen or you're outside the pen. The Pharisees are putting themselves beyond saving grace because they refuse to believe. They've seen the evidence of a miraculous healing, and probably earlier ones as well. They've cross-examined the witnesses and his parents. They've interviewed the man himself twice, and still they are cynical. They're doubting the motives. They're skeptical. They're so swept up in their righteousness, their right living, and their obedience to the letter of the law that they are blind to what is right in front of them, and they claim that they see. They might look religious. They might be doing a lot, but they're missing the real deal. So I know for a lot of you sitting here that you've made up your mind about Jesus and this claim a long time ago. But I hope this is still going to be useful and something of a challenge as you reflect on your own circumstances. So what about us? What about our hearts? How am I like a Pharisee, which is a bit uncomfortable, maybe? We have heard tell, we have read, we have heard testimony. Maybe it's true for you that no matter what you hear or see, you'd be cynical, distrusting, skeptical, finding fault, looking for ways to doubt or find holes in the argument, refusing to believe. Are you willing to open your eyes? Do you want to? The Pharisees had a first-hand account of the miracles of the blind man receiving his sight, on top of the other things they'd already seen and heard. Healings, miracles, teaching. And on the face of it, they got hung up on it being the Sabbath. It was against the law to work. It was one of the 10 commandments. Keep the Sabbath day holy. And in their eyes, this had been broken. This was the outward focus of their outrage. Are you hung up on an issue that you just can't get past? Maybe you blamed God for something. Or do you look at history and see what's been done in the name of religion? Or there's some other sticking point. But actually, would anything convince you? Would there always be a reason why you can't believe? If that's you, what would it mean if you could believe? Perhaps there's a part of you that longs for hope for the future, to have eternal life, a better way to live, but you just can't or you won't trust. Has your experience of life been that you're better off relying on yourself? Trust nobody. If you want a job done, do it yourself. That to believe that you really could be safe in another, in Jesus, is just such a hard step to take. That to feel okay in the world, you need to be in control. And allowing Jesus in would mean you were not in control. It would challenge that. Things would be different. Change would happen. You would be vulnerable. Better to batten down the hatches and shut out the possibilities. If that's you, could you trust that he really does call you by name? He knows your name. He doesn't call sheep, sheep, like the woman in the video. It's personal. He's calling Andy, Claire, Sarah, Steve, Tato. And people over here too. I know that. Could you let God be God so that you can be truly you, the you that you were made to be, not the adapted to the scars of the world version of you? Perhaps for the Pharisees, their real problem was that they were thrown by a different way of the outworking of God that didn't look like the way they thought it should. Perhaps it brought up comparison, feeling inadequate. After all, they were the ones people should look to for teaching, that brought status and respect and validation. But now this interlope has arrived and is doing incredible things. So where did that leave them? This was unnerving and unsettling. So was it easier to turn to resentment, criticism, contempt? How do I respond when God works in a new way and it looks different? Do I resist? Do I show resentment and criticism, contempt? Do I judge? These could be summed up by this picture. Oh, not that one. Oh, what's happened to my picture? That one. We're coming to the other one. This one. I know I'm mixing some animal pictures here, but bear with me. So our old retriever, this isn't our old retriever, but she definitely did this. Our old retriever loved to go for a walk. But as she got older, we'd be part way through the walk, probably as far from the house as we could be, and she would decide that she wasn't going to move. She would stick her heels in, not another step. And if it was bad enough, she'd actually lie down on the floor, and like in the middle of the road, and utterly refuse to move. And she was a big dog, so it wasn't like you just scoop her up and pick her up. It was quite a problem. So are we like this? Are we resistant, stubborn? I don't want to. I choose not to. We hear, but we have our own rebellion. I know best. I'll do it my way. I'll do it in my strength. I'll put my trust somewhere different. Maybe it will be money or intellect within my understanding or achievement. Maybe you'd rather postpone the decision. After all, there's always another day. Perhaps thinking about it is uncomfortable and it's easier to cruise along. Perhaps you're going through the motions, but you know deep down in your heart you're not truly stepped into the sheepfold. Perhaps changing the way things are, even if you don't have life in all its fullness, it's just the groove you're in, the rut it's hard to shift out of. And what's the rush? There's always another day. Until one day, there isn't. And you're missing out. You're missing the real deal. Life in all its fullness now. So to go back to our retriever, I know this is a lab, go back to our retriever. So sometimes we take her out and she'd head off to the bushes or somewhere, probably where there might be some food, and she'd hear us call. Nothing wrong with her hearing, but choose to ignore. It's the doggy equivalent of la la la. It's like this dog here, it's like, oh yeah, I see you. I hear you, but tomorrow, not today. I'm busy right now. Got a bush to sniff in. So try another time. I'll avoid thinking about it. Or I'm shutting out my fears another way. Something that keeps me occupied. Maybe it's working all the time. Or it's playing sport to excess, or the gym, or watching sport to excess. Maybe it's porn, or shopping, or gambling, drinking a bit too much. Distractions that aren't really working for us, but they keep us occupied. If that's you, do you live in freedom? Does the busyness or the distraction feel meaningful? Did you grow up in the sheepfold, in a believing family, following the other sheep? But the time has come to decide for yourself. Do I choose to follow Jesus' voice? Where am I in all this? Or maybe you've been a follower for a long time, but when you're really honest, you sometimes aren't so sure. Maybe it's feeling a bit faded, not how it used to, or you're flagging and in need of refreshing. Am I choosing to be in the sheepfold or outside? Have I grown blind to passages of the Bible that I've known all my life? Have I lost the wonder? Has life wearied me and I'm distracted? Do I want to hear his voice when he calls my name? We get to choose. Nothing is imposed on us. We're not chased around by spiritual sheepdogs snapping at our heels, rounding us up. We have a choice. Am I like the dog sniffing in the bushes with selective deafness? Or am I drifting? Have I got blind spots like the Pharisees? If that's you, take action. Jesus says, I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief only comes to steal and kill and destroy. the things of the world that lead you away from God. They don't take you to a place of ultimate safety. They don't satisfy the deepest desires of your heart, because only your Maker can. They don't bring life, and life in all its fullness. Am I willing to say, or to say again, I trust you, Jesus. I follow you. I trust you to keep me safe. You have my eternity in your hands, and you are the place of ultimate safety. You call me by name. You know my name. Insignificant me. The sheep listen to his voice. They grow trust with familiarity. It's a relationship. It's not just intellectual. It's not just knowledge. It's through how we experience God. He knows us. When I sit and when I rise, as it says in Psalm 139. He knew us before we knew ourselves. He knits us together in our mother's womb. This is an ongoing relationship. If the shepherd only popped in now and again, the sheep wouldn't know his voice or trust him. He does life with them, out in the pastures, on the hilltops, in the valleys, in the sunshine, and in the storm. It's about a daily walk, following the shepherd as he takes us through the pastures of life and brings us to safety. So we need to be intentional about listening for his voice. If we don't make space, how will we hear? Are we so busy doing that there's no time for being? Are we so busy trying to feel safe by keeping everything under control that we don't get to rest under his shepherding? I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. It's not a pale imitation, it's hope for now. So finally, let's turn to the question we started with. What is fullness of life? When the chips are down and the crisis is here, what do people really want? What really matters? It's not the stuff we own, or the places we've been, or the daring experiences we've had. It seems people want one thing: connection. And that leads them to do two things. If you think of the stories of the people involved in 9/11, in the 9/11 disaster or other disasters, they want to let their family and their close friends know that they love them. And the second thing they do, they pray. Fullness of life, or life in abundance, it's God's kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven, but it's now. It's connection to the loving heart of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, to know where we belong, where we have our true identity, to fully trust in his goodness, to know we are loved and could not be more loved, to know we are safe in his sheepfold for all eternity, with death defeated, that the storms may come, but we are built on the rock. Connection to the people around us, seeing them as image bearers of God, with restoration of brokenness, to bring wholeness and contentment, to live in freedom, to be our authentic selves and to be transformed by the renewing of our mind, as it says in Romans. Not stuck in yesterday or worried for tomorrow, but with a sense of vitality in the here and the now, to have a life of meaning and significance and purpose in Jesus. It's not a full life by means of busyness. It's a life of the outworking of loving God and loving our neighbours. God is trustworthy and generous, not just life, but life to the full. Let's remember this and live in his promise. Let's ask him to remove our skepticism, grow our faith, take away our blind spots and our lethargy, so he can work in our lives. So if you are out and you want to be in the sheepfold, please come and talk to me, because I'd love to pray with you. Or if you feel like you're a sheep in the pen, but you're flagging rather than leaping at the sound of the shepherd, I'd love to pray with you too. Jesus says, I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Amen. So we'll just spend a moment reflecting on what we've heard. It's a chance for you to respond, to think where you are in your heart. How are you doing? Are you in? Are you out? Do you want to chat with Jesus right at the gate? I'm going back to the dog thing. Are you sniffing in the bushes? Nicely distracted. Wandering off with your fingers in your ears. La, la, la. I hear you, but I don't want to. The bit of rebellion. Jesus, thank you that you are the gate. That whoever enters through you will be saved. Thank you that you call us by name, that you care about each of us individually. Thank you that you have come, that we may have life to the full for now and all eternity. Thank you that you made a way that just involves me accepting you with no entrance exam. Help me trust you more. Help me let go of wanting to be in control, or when I get sidetracked or drift, bring me back. Take me deeper and further into your love. Help me step into your abundant life. Let your kingdom come and your will be done in my life. Amen. As it says in the last battle, in C.S. Lewis's, well, it's not a trilogy, is it? There's more than 3. Book series, The Chronicles of Narnia, The Last Battle. At the end of the last battle, the children find Aslan, and there's a new creation. And Aslan the lion is galloping along, and the kids are going too, and lots of other people as well. And he's saying, further on and further in. And it's an exciting ride. It's like where the colours are brighter and the focus is crisper. And things are more real, where you feel more you and more real and more alive. That's life in abundance, isn't it? Don't we want that? That's what I want. I want to be further on and further in and deeper. And that's available to us. Oh, Lord, thank you. And help me, because I'm just la-la-la-ing half the time. So, Sarah, do we have a song?